I told you this is my night. And the fact is, this can still go either way. After tonight, I'll either be in hiding, locked up, or dead.
We're doing something a little bit different this time to spice up the series, because there's one film that deconstructs all of our favorite slashers in such an interesting way, even showing off their locations in its opening, that I thought it was well past time that we cover it here, because this is more than just a meta look at slasher films. This is a creation of one of the greatest what-if villains of the modern era, and they managed all of that intrigue with just one film. So join us today on Real Slashers as we dive into Behind the Mask, the Rise of Leslie Vernon.
You came to me to find out how guys like Mike and Chucky and Freddy do what they do, not why. I can't just sit here on the first night I ever met you and explain it to you. It's got to come from your own understanding of the process.
It's hard to hear the premise of Behind the Mask and not be at least a little intrigued. A film crew follows a would-be slasher. Nathan Basil's Leslie Vernon is an absolute blast to spend time with, and nearly everything that he says is pure gold. It's not hard to see why these filmmakers would be drawn to him, as he is very charismatic. Even when he's talking about rather dark things, it somehow seems less so, just because it's coming from him. That's all to say that when he makes the switch, he is quite the formidable villain. But we're not quite there yet. Taylor Gentry and her cameramen, Doug and Todd, set out to Glen Echo in order to cover Leslie and his planned rampage. They treat it like they would any other school project, and don't let any of the, let's just say, strange things get to them. There does seem to be some skepticism present.
Strike, meaning the first person you're gonna kill.
In continuing with honoring the films of the genre, there's even a character that's a full-on Dr. Sam Loomis ripoff. But that's not a bad thing, as it's a trope that can be rather enjoyable. Especially since he's played by Robert motherfucking Englund. I mean, I don't even need to get into why Englund is the absolute man, but his Doc Halloran is great when he shows up. If anything, I'd say he's a bit underutilized, as he doesn't appear in the film nearly enough. As far as the actual production goes, Behind the Mask was mostly shot around Portland, Oregon and surrounding areas, and definitely has that Pacific Northwest vibe. They even shot on location at all of the filming spots from the original Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th. And while the shift from documentary style to full-on cinematic is rather polarizing for some, I'm one of those people that thinks it really works. Because when the documentary cameras go down, the third act turns into a straight-up slasher film. It can get a bit stereotypical, but if anything, it just tries to make the point that people do stupid things in life or death situations, even when they know what's coming. So I enjoy that message, even if it can get a little bit silly at times. But the real highlight of the film is when it's revealed that the survivor girl that they've been following, Kelly, isn't who Leslie made her out to be. In fact, she's a bit of a slut. That's because she's not the survivor girl, it's been Taylor the entire time. Leslie has been manipulating her and building her up to be his final girl. So when Taylor finally stands up to him and takes him out in the old apple orchard, it feels like something Leslie planned for all along. His defeat is a positive in his book. Then when we see the credits, we see that Leslie has planned for it all.
You have no idea how much cardio I have to do.
Why so much?
Well, you gotta be able to run like a freaking gazelle without getting winded. Plus, there's that whole thing of making it look like you're walking, and everybody else is running their asses off. And I gotta stay with them.
Yeah.
It's tough, man. It's tough.
Nathan Basil's Leslie Vernon is one of the better horror characters of the last 20 years. His infectious energy and strict rules for success really provides someone that feels in control at all times, despite his manic mindset. One of the coolest parts of the film is when Leslie meets up with another spree killer. Eugene is essentially Leslie's mentor, and he's set up as someone who used to stalk and kill sorority girls back in the day. Whether this is someone from an actual movie is up for your interpretation, but we're able to see what Leslie aspires to be, especially since Eugene fell in love with Jamie, who happened to be a survivor girl. Clearly, this is something that Leslie wants for himself and Taylor. And while we may be calling him Leslie Vernon, his real name is actually Leslie Mancuso, and he's a patient of the previously mentioned Doc Halloran. He's taken on the persona as a hopes of creating a slasher legend using an already established town tale. As far as appearance, his old overalls and golem-like mask make for a pretty creepy look, and his main weapon of a hand scythe really brings that look together. But like any good slasher, he's not beholden to just one weapon, and uses several throughout the runtime.
It is going to get wet in here tonight. Lace your boots up, kiddies.
My absolute favorite scene in the movie is when the camera crew realizes the gravity of their situation. Despite the fact that they've been chronicling Leslie's plan for a massacre this whole time, there's almost a watching a child play pretend element. Technically, poor Zelda Rubinstein is our first kill before this, yet even with how it's shot, the gravity of the kill doesn't really land on the viewer, therefore it doesn't land on the camera crew themselves. They're mostly just celebrating the fact that Leslie found his Ahhh in Doc Halloran. But when they're hiding in this back room as Leslie is psyching himself up, you can just feel the tension in the room. When Leslie puts the mask on, you can almost see a switch. And then this is where the good sound effects pay for themselves, because the effect of Leslie slicing up these kids is absolutely brutal. I mean, just listen to this. Ouch. When we see Taylor's gobsmacked reaction, it's hard not to feel the same. We have officially entered the point of no return. Leslie realizes what's going on and immediately gets them out of there before they mess up his night. The cameramen start putting away their gear as they know that they just can't stand back and do nothing. So they go in to save them before Leslie can continue his deadly night. Of course, we know better, and that this is all part of Leslie's plan.
Is he?
I don't know what he is.
Just a man. He's just a man.
Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon released on March 12, 2006, and only managed to bring in $69,000 at the box office. But see, this was the DVD era, so judging it based on a limited box office run seems unfair. The film holds a 76% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and seems genuinely loved in the horror world. Even Doc Halloran himself, Robert Englund, has shared quite the fondness for the film.
The Leslie Vernon films, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is, I just think, a terrific homage. If Quentin Tarantino loaned me the Beverly Movie Theater in Hollywood for a double bill of two of my movies, that would definitely be, Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon, and Last Showing.
Mockumentaries are tough because there's a fine line between dissecting something in a funny way and simply making fun of it. Thankfully, Behind the Mask really takes great pains to treat the slasher genre with respect, which is a big reason why I wanted to cover it on the show. It's not typical until it reaches its third act, and then it becomes a slasher like many others. And while some may mark that down as points against it, as a lover of all things slasher, I loved being able to see Leslie in his element, and would have felt robbed without it. Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon is absolutely a product of the mid-2000s, and most importantly, I think it serves perfectly as a bridge between 80s slashers and a post-Scream world. While we may have never gotten the often talked about sequel, you can check out what that film may have looked like as we covered it on the channel. While the movie mostly serves as a story of what could have been with the Leslie Vernon character, Its singular outing entertains from start to finish. It both dissects and celebrates the slasher film, and that's something I can definitely get behind.